The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers as Celia's voice drifted through the kitchen window above my head. I was flat on my back beneath our battered Ford pickup, changing the oil filter like I did every Saturday morning, when her words stopped me cold. He's safe, Jake. Completely disposable. I need excitement. Bryce gives me that rush. Poor Seth is just a stepping stone to something better. My name is Seth Morrison, and I've been married to Celia for 8 years. I run Morrison's Auto Repair in Eastport, Maine, the same shop my father built 30 years ago before the town started its slow slide into irrelevance. Celia sells real estate for coastal properties, hawking overpriced condos to wealthy tourists who want a piece of authentic Maine without the authenticity. I should have rolled out from under that truck and marched into the kitchen to confront her. Instead, I lay there on the cold concrete, staring at the rust-eaten exhaust pipe, and listened to my wife plan my replacement. "Tonight at 7, she continued, her voice honey-sweet with anticipation. "The Harbor View penthouse. Bryce says he has champagne and something special planned." Bryce Kellerman. I knew the name from Celia's office parties. Tall, perfectly groomed, drove a Tesla that probably cost more than I made in 2 years. He specialized in luxury waterfront properties, the kind that came with private docks and helicopter pads. The call ended, and I heard Celia's heels clicking across our kitchen floor. She appeared in the garage doorway, all smiles and Saturday morning radiance. "How's the truck coming along, honey?" she asked, leaning against the doorframe in her yoga pants and designer top. "Just finishing up," I said, sliding out from underneath. "You heading somewhere today?" "Open house in Bar Harbor. Might run late. You know how these things go." I wiped my hands on an old rag, studying her face. 8 years of marriage, and she could still lie to me without so much as a twitch. It was almost impressive. "Sure," I said. "I'll grab dinner at Mick's place." Mick Brennan owned the Anchor Tavern downtown, the kind of weathered dive bar where locals went to complain about tourists and reminisce about better times. He'd been my best friend since high school, back when we both thought we'd escape Eastport and make something of ourselves in the wider world. Celia kissed my forehead, a gesture that once meant affection, but now felt like marking territory. "Don't wait up," she said, already heading back inside. I stood there in my garage, surrounded by the tools and machinery that had been my life's work, and realized I was looking at everything differently now. The hydraulic lift my father had installed in 1995, the pegboard where every wrench had its designated spot, the framed photo of Dad and me at my high school graduation, both of us grinning like we owned the world. Everything felt smaller suddenly. Not just the garage, but me, Seth Morrison, the disposable husband. That afternoon, I drove to the Harbor View complex on the pretense of delivering some parts to a customer nearby. The building rose from the rocky coastline like a glass and steel monument to everything Eastport was becoming, expensive, exclusive, and utterly foreign to the people who'd called this place home for generations. I parked across the street and waited. At 6:30, Celia's silver Lexus pulled into the visitor parking. She'd changed into a black dress I'd never seen before, something that probably cost more than most people in town made in a week. Bryce met her at the entrance, all confident swagger in his tailored suit. He kissed her cheek, lingering longer than politeness required, and guided her inside with his hand on the small of her back. I sat in my truck for another hour, watching the penthouse windows glow with warm light, imagining my wife laughing at Bryce's jokes, impressed by his wealth, planning a future that didn't include me. The smart move would have been to drive home, pack my things, and file for divorce. Clean break, minimal drama, split our modest assets down the middle, and move on with whatever remained of my life. But as I drove through downtown Eastport, past the boarded-up storefronts and the locals nursing their Saturday night sorrows at places like Mick's, I realized I wasn't feeling heartbroken. I was feeling something else entirely. Anger, yes. Betrayal, certainly. But underneath those expected emotions was something colder and more calculating. Celia thought I was disposable, a stepping stone to her real life. She'd underestimated me completely. I pulled into the Anchor Tavern parking lot where Mick was locking up for the night. "Seth," he called out, jingling his keys. "You look like someone who needs a drink and a friendly ear." "Actually," I said, "I think I need something else entirely." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Mick raised an eyebrow. In the yellow glow of the parking lot lights, his weathered face looked like a roadmap of hard-earned wisdom. "What's that?" "Revenge." Monday morning brought the kind of gray, drizzling weather that made Eastport look like a postcard from purgatory. I opened the garage at 7 sharp, same as always, and spent the morning rebuilding a transmission for Mrs. Patterson's ancient Buick. Celia left for work in her usual flurry of perfume and self-importance, kissing my cheek with lips that had probably been on Bryce Kellerman's face less than 12 hours earlier. "Big day today," she announced, checking her reflection in the hallway mirror. 3 showings, plus that new listing on Ocean Drive. "Sounds exciting," I said, not looking up from my coffee. "It is. This could be my biggest month yet." After she left, I called Mick and told him I'd be closing the shop early. Then I drove to Coastal Properties. The office occupied a prime spot on Main Street, all floor-to-ceiling windows and modern furniture designed to impress potential clients. Through the glass, I could see Celia at her desk, animated and engaged as she spoke to a well-dressed couple about their dream home. I wasn't there to see her, though. I was there for Riley Matthews. Riley had been Celia's best friend since college, her maid of honor at our wedding, and the person my wife trusted with her deepest secrets. She also worked as a real estate agent in the same office, though her sales numbers never quite matched Celia's success, a fact that had created subtle tension between them over the years. I found Riley at the coffee shop next door, scrolling through her phone while nursing a latte that probably cost $8. "Seth," she said, looking up with surprise, "what brings you downtown on a Monday?" Riley was attractive in an understated way. Shoulder-length auburn hair, intelligent green eyes, and the kind of professional wardrobe that suggested ambition without quite achieving it. She'd always been friendly to me, though I'd sensed an undercurrent of something else. Pity, maybe? Or recognition that we were both playing supporting roles in Celia's starring production. "Thought I'd surprise Celia with lunch," I said, settling into the chair across from her. "But it looks like she's busy with clients." "She's been swamped lately. 3 major deals in the pipeline, plus that new partnership with the Harbor View development." "Harbor View?" I kept my voice casual. "That's Bryce Kellerman's project, right?" Riley's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of something I couldn't quite identify. "Among others. Celia's been working closely with him on the marketing strategy." "I bet she has." The words came out sharper than I'd intended. Riley set down her latte and studied my face. "Is everything okay, Seth? You seem..." "Tired," I finished. "Business has been slow. Sometimes I wonder if Celia deserves better than a small-town mechanic." It was a calculated vulnerability, designed to invite confidence. Riley leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Don't say that. Celia's lucky to have someone genuine in her life. This business, these clients, it's all surface-level glamour. You're real. Real doesn't pay for designer dresses or fancy dinners." "Is that what she's been saying?" I shrugged, letting the implication hang in the air. Riley's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Celia can be demanding," she said carefully. "Success has changed her. Some of us remember when she was just another college kid with big dreams and a student loan payment. Some of us. The people who knew her before she decided she was destined for greatness." There it was, the resentment I'd sensed but never fully understood. Riley Matthews had been watching her best friend's meteoric rise while her own career remained stubbornly earthbound. She'd been supportive in public and quietly bitter in private. "Well," I said, standing up, "I should let you get back to work. Thanks for listening." "Seth," she called as I reached the door, "if you ever need someone to talk to, someone who understands what it's like to feel overlooked, I'm here." I drove back to the garage with the first piece of my plan falling into place. Riley Matthews was going to be very useful. That evening, Celia came home late again, full of apologies and excitement about her latest deal. She'd changed clothes at some point during the day. The conservative blouse she'd worn to work had been replaced by something silkier and more revealing. "Sorry, honey," she said, barely glancing at the dinner I'd kept warm for her. "Riley and I grabbed something while we were working on the Ocean Drive proposal. Riley mentioned she saw you today, said you've been putting in long hours." Celia paused, a forkful of pasta halfway to her mouth. "You talked to Riley?" "Ran into her at the coffee shop. She seemed worried about you, all this stress from the Harbor View project." "What exactly did she say?" The sharpness in her voice was unmistakable. I'd touched a nerve. "Nothing specific, just that you've been working closely with that Kellerman guy. She seemed to think it was taking a toll." Celia relaxed slightly, but I could see her mental gears turning, calculating what Riley might have revealed and what damage control might be necessary. "Bryce is a demanding client," she said finally, "but the commission will be worth it. I'm sure it will." Later that night, as Celia showered off whatever remained of her afternoon activities, I sat at my laptop and began researching Bryce Kellerman. Social media profiles, business records, local news articles. I absorbed everything I could find about the man who was sleeping with my wife. He was 42, divorced, no children. Originally from Boston, he'd moved to Maine 5 years ago to escape what one article described as personal and professional difficulties. His LinkedIn profile was polished and impressive, but a deeper search revealed some interesting details. A lawsuit from his previous employer, alleging misappropriation of client funds, settled out of court, record sealed, but the timing coincided perfectly with his relocation to Maine. 3 different addresses in 2 years before settling into his current Harbor View penthouse. A pattern of short-term relationships with women who worked in real estate or hospitality. Always professional connections, always ending abruptly. Bryce Kellerman wasn't just arrogant and entitled. He was running from something, building a new identity in a small town where people were impressed by his city's sophistication and didn't ask too many questions about his past. I closed the laptop and listened to the shower running upstairs. Tomorrow, I'd start putting my plan into motion. But tonight, I was content to lie in bed next to my wife and imagine the look on Bryce Kellerman's face when his carefully constructed new life began to crumble. Celia emerged from the bathroom wrapped in a towel, her hair still damp from the shower. "You're up late," she said, settling into bed beside me. "Couldn't sleep? Too much on my mind." She turned toward me, and for a moment I saw a flicker of the woman I'd married. Concerned, caring, genuinely interested in my well-being. "Want to talk about it?" "Just business stuff. Nothing you need to worry about." She kissed my forehead, the same gesture from Saturday morning that had once meant love and now felt like dismissal. "Things will get better," she said. "You'll see." As she drifted off to sleep, I stared at the ceiling and smiled in the darkness. She was right about one thing. Things were definitely going to get better. Just not for her. Tuesday morning, I called in a favor from Danny Russo, who ran the town's only private investigation service out of a cramped office above the hardware store. Danny owed me for the work I'd done on his surveillance van, new transmission, rebuilt engine, and a discount that had saved him $3,000. "I need GPS tracking," I told him over coffee at Mick's place. "Something small, reliable, and undetectable." Danny raised an eyebrow but didn't ask questions. That was why people trusted him with their secrets. "How long you need it active?" "A few weeks, maybe a month. 500 plus installation. Deal." That afternoon, while Celia attended what she claimed was a client meeting, but which I suspected was another romantic rendezvous, I drove to Harbor View with Danny's equipment in my toolbox. The Tesla was parked in Bryce's assigned spot, gleaming black paint reflecting the overcast sky. I'd brought a legitimate excuse, a maintenance request from the building's property manager, who needed someone to look at the parking garage's ventilation system. The GPS tracker was smaller than a matchbox, magnetic, and designed to blend in with the vehicle's undercarriage. It took me less than 30 seconds to attach it to the Tesla's frame, hidden among the battery housing where only a trained mechanic would think to look. As I worked, I heard voices echoing from the stairwell. Celia's laugh, bright and carefree, followed by Bryce's deeper chuckle. They emerged into the garage together, her hand resting possessively on his arm. I ducked behind a concrete pillar and watched them approach the Tesla. Bryce opened the passenger door for her with exaggerated gallantry, and she slid into the leather seat like she belonged there. "Where are we going?" I heard her ask. "Surprise," Bryce replied, starting the engine. "Somewhere we can be alone." They drove off toward Route 1, heading north out of town. I waited 5 minutes, then activated the tracking app on my phone. The Tesla's location appeared as a red dot moving steadily toward Bar Harbor. Over the next week, I monitored their movements obsessively. Lunch meetings that lasted 3 hours, evening drives to secluded overlooks, overnight stays at boutique hotels along the coast. The GPS data painted a clear picture of an affair that had moved far beyond casual flirtation. But I needed more than electronic evidence. I needed leverage. Friday afternoon, I closed the garage early and drove to the Ocean View Resort, where the GPS showed Bryce's Tesla had been parked for the past 2 hours. The hotel catered to wealthy tourists and local professionals conducting business that required discretion. I found a spot in the parking lot with a clear view of the main entrance and settled in to wait. At 4:30, Bryce emerged alone, checking his phone as he walked to his car. He looked relaxed, satisfied, like a man who just concluded a successful business transaction. 30 minutes later, Celia appeared, but she wasn't alone. The woman beside her was younger, blonde, and wearing the kind of expensive casual wear that screamed, "Trust Fund Baby." They hugged goodbye at the entrance, and the blonde climbed into a white BMW with Massachusetts plates. I took photos of everything, Bryce leaving, Celia with the mystery woman, license plates, timestamps. Then I followed the BMW as it headed south toward the Massachusetts border. The trail led to Camden, where the blonde met with another man at an upscale restaurant. This one was older, distinguished, wearing a wedding ring that caught the light as he gestured over his wine glass. I sat in my truck across the street, puzzle pieces clicking into place. This wasn't just about Celia having an affair. This was about business, the kind of business that required hotel meetings and out-of-state connections and careful coordination between people who had reasons to keep their relationship secret. That night, I confronted Riley Matthews. I found her at the Anchor Tavern, nursing a glass of wine and staring at her laptop screen with the kind of focused intensity that suggested frustration. "Busy night?" I asked, sliding into the booth across from her. She looked up, startled. "Seth, I didn't expect to see you here." "Mick's got the best Wi-Fi in town. Mind if I join you?" She gestured to the empty seat, closing her laptop slightly. "Just catching up on some research. New client, lots of moving parts?" "Speaking of moving parts, I've been thinking about our conversation the other day. About Celia and the Harbor View project." Riley's expression grew cautious. "What about it?" "You mentioned she's been working closely with Bryce Kellerman. I'm starting to wonder if there's more to that relationship than just business." The words hung in the air between us. Riley took a sip of her wine, buying time to formulate her response. "What makes you say that?" "Little things. Late nights, new clothes, changes in her routine. Plus, she's been different at home, distracted, secretive." "Have you talked to her about it? Would you? If you suspected your spouse was having an affair, would you confront them without proof?" Riley set down her wine glass and leaned forward. "What kind of proof are you looking for?" "The kind that would hold up in divorce court." It was a lie, but a useful one. Riley's eyes lit up with something that might have been excitement or vindication or simple schadenfreude. "I might be able to help with that," she said quietly. "How?" "Celia trusts me. She tells me things, maybe more than she should, and I have access to her calendar, her client files, her expense reports." "You do that?" Riley's smile was sharp around the edges. "Let's just say I'm tired of watching certain people get ahead while others do the actual work." We spent the next hour planning. Riley would document Celia's activities, gather evidence of her relationship with Bryce, and help me build a case for infidelity. In exchange, I'd make sure she was positioned to take over Celia's clients when the scandal broke. It was a mutually beneficial arrangement, the kind of temporary alliance that forms when two people discover they share a common enemy. As I drove home that night, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: anticipation. For too long, I'd been a passive participant in my own life, accepting whatever scraps of attention and affection Celia chose to throw my way. Now, I was taking control, and it felt incredible. The evidence Riley provided exceeded my expectations: expense reports showing dinners for two at restaurants I couldn't afford, calendar entries for client meetings that corresponded exactly with Bryce's availability, text message screenshots that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. But the most damaging material came from an unexpected source: Celia herself. "She keeps a journal," Riley explained during one of our clandestine meetings at the coffee shop. "Digital, password protected, but she uses the same password for everything." "How do you know her password?" "She asked me to check her email once when she was showing a property. It's her maiden name plus her birth year. Not exactly Fort Knox-level security." Riley slid a flash drive across the table. 6 months of entries. Everything you need to know about her relationship with Bryce, plus some interesting details about their business arrangements. That night, I read every entry. Celia's journal was a masterpiece of self-justification and romantic delusion. She described me as sweet but limited, a placeholder husband who provided stability while she figured out what she really wanted from life. Bryce, by contrast, was her soulmate, a sophisticated man who understood her ambitions and could provide the lifestyle she deserved. She wrote about their future together in explicit detail: the house they'd buy, the trips they'd take, the social circle they'd join once she was free from her temporary marriage. But the business details were what really caught my attention. Celia and Bryce weren't just having an affair, they were running a sophisticated real estate scam, targeting out-of-state buyers with inflated property values and hidden fees. The blonde woman from the hotel was their connection to a network of investors who were being systematically defrauded. I had enough evidence to destroy both of them, but I wanted something more satisfying than a simple exposure. I wanted them to experience the same sense of powerlessness and humiliation they'd inflicted on their victims. The plan I developed was elegant in its simplicity. First, I would use Riley's access to Celia's files to identify their current marks, the investors who were being set up for the biggest scam. Then I would anonymously tip off both the investors and the authorities, timing the revelation to cause maximum chaos. But before I pulled that trigger, I wanted one final confrontation with Bryce Kellerman. I found him at the Harbor View Golf Club on a sunny Thursday morning, playing 18 holes with two other men I recognized as local business leaders. I waited until they reached the 7th tee, a secluded spot overlooking the ocean where our conversation wouldn't be overheard. "Bryce Kellerman," I called out as he lined up his shot. He turned, squinting in the morning sun. "Do I know you?" "Seth Morrison, Celia's husband." The color drained from his face, but he recovered quickly. His playing partners exchanged glances and moved tactfully out of earshot. "What can I do for you, Seth?" "You can stop sleeping with my wife." Bryce's laugh was forced, artificial. "I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding. I know about the hotel meetings, the business trips, the apartment you've been promising to buy for her. I know about the investment scam you're running and the federal investigators who are about to take a very close look at your business practices." Now he wasn't laughing. "What do you want?" "I want you to disappear. Leave town, end your relationship with Celia, and find some other community to infect with your particular brand of corruption." "And if I don't?" I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo of him entering the Ocean View Resort with the blonde woman from Massachusetts. "Then I release everything I know to the FBI, the state attorney general's office, and the local newspaper. Your choice." Bryce stared at the photos, his face cycling through anger, fear, and calculation. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" I forwarded the photo to his phone, along with a selection of other incriminating images. His device buzzed repeatedly as the messages arrived. 24 hours, I said, pocketing my phone. After that, I start making calls. I walked away, leaving him standing on the tee with his golf club hanging limply at his side. That evening, Celia came home in a state of barely controlled panic. "We need to talk," she said, pacing around our living room like a caged animal. "About what?" "Someone's been asking questions about my business, making threats." "What kind of threats?" She stopped pacing and looked at me directly. "Seth, I need you to know that whatever you might hear about me, about my work, it's not what it seems." "What am I going to hear?" "There might be some irregularities in how certain deals were structured. Nothing criminal, just aggressive sales tactics that some people might misinterpret." It was fascinating to watch her construct a narrative that cast her as the victim of misunderstanding rather than the architect of fraud. "Are you in trouble?" "I might be, and if I am, it could affect both of us. Our house, our savings, everything we've built together." The irony was breathtaking. She was asking for my support and protection while actively planning to abandon me for another man. "What do you need me to do?" "Just stand by me. Whatever happens, whatever you hear, remember that I love you and I'm fighting for our future." I took her hands in mine, looking into her eyes with all the sincerity I could muster. "Of course I'll stand by you. We're in this together." She collapsed against me, sobbing with relief and gratitude. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. The next morning, I made 3 phone calls. The first was to the FBI field office in Portland, where I spoke to an agent who specialized in financial crimes. The second was to the Maine Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division. The third was to Jake Morrison, the investigative reporter for the Portland Herald who'd been covering real estate fraud along the coast. By noon, Celia's world was beginning to unravel. The federal agents arrived at Coastal Properties on Friday morning like a bureaucratic SWAT team. Dark suits, briefcases, and the kind of polite efficiency that turns comfortable lives into legal nightmares. I watched from my garage across town as the news spread through Eastport's gossip network. Mick called first, then Mrs. Patterson, then half a dozen other customers who'd heard that Celia Morrison was being investigated for real estate fraud. "They seized her computer," Mick reported during his lunch break. "Riley Matthews, too. Whole office is in chaos." "What about Bryce Kellerman?" "Gone. Packed up his penthouse yesterday night and disappeared. Tesla's still in the parking garage, but nobody's seen him since Thursday. So Bryce had taken my advice and fled town. Smart move, but ultimately pointless. The federal investigation would follow him wherever he went." Celia came home that afternoon looking like she'd aged 10 years in 8 hours. Her professional composure had cracked, revealing the frightened woman underneath. "They think I stole money," she said, collapsing onto our couch. $500,000 from investors who trusted me." "Did you?" The question hung between us like a loaded weapon. Celia's eyes filled with tears. "It's complicated. The money was always going to be returned, with interest. We were just borrowing it temporarily to finance other deals. We? Bryce and I. It was his idea, his system. I just helped with the paperwork." Even now, facing federal charges, she was trying to minimize her responsibility. Bryce was the mastermind. She was just the innocent assistant who got in over her head. "Where is he now?" "I don't know. He won't answer his phone, won't return my messages. I think he's abandoned me." The pain in her voice was genuine, and I realized she was experiencing the same sense of betrayal and abandonment that she'd inflicted on me. The difference was that I'd never stolen money or broken federal laws to fund my infidelity. What happens now? My lawyer says I need to cooperate with the investigation, provide evidence against Bryce in exchange for a reduced sentence. Evidence? Financial records, communications, details about how the scam worked. She looked at me with desperate hope. Seth, I need you to know that everything I did for us, for our future. I wanted to give you a better life. It was a masterful performance, but I'd read her journal. I knew exactly who she'd been planning that better life with, and it wasn't me. I understand, I said. What can I do to help? Over the next week, I played the role of the supportive husband while Celia's legal situation deteriorated. Her lawyer was expensive but realistic. She was facing serious federal charges, and her best hope was a plea bargain that would send her to minimum security prison for 18 months. Riley Matthews, meanwhile, had made her own deal with prosecutors. In exchange for her testimony against Celia and Bryce, she would receive probation and be allowed to keep her real estate license. Riley's the one who turned us in, Celia said bitterly. My best friend, the person I trusted with everything. Why would she do that? Jealousy. She never forgave me for being more successful, for getting the clients and commissions she thought she deserved. There was some truth to that, but it wasn't the whole story. Riley had turned against Celia because I'd given her the evidence and motivation to do so. She'd been my weapon, carefully aimed and precisely deployed. The final confrontation came on a gray October morning at the Eastport Community Center, where the town was holding its annual Harvest Festival. Local businesses set up booths, families brought their children for games and activities, and the whole community gathered to celebrate another year of survival in their slowly fading corner of Maine. Celia had insisted on attending, despite her legal troubles. I need people to see that I'm not hiding, she explained, that I'm facing this situation with dignity. What she really wanted was to maintain the illusion that she was the victim of circumstances beyond her control, a good person who'd made some unfortunate business decisions. I watched her work the crowd, accepting sympathy and support from neighbors who didn't fully understand the scope of her crimes. She was still beautiful, still charming, still capable of making people believe whatever version of reality served her purposes. But her performance was interrupted by an unexpected arrival. Bryce Kellerman walked into the community center like he owned the place, wearing an expensive suit and the kind of confident smile that had fooled so many people for so long. The crowd parted as he approached Celia's booth, conversation stopping as people recognized the man whose face had been on the front page of the local newspaper for the past week. "Hello, darling," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Miss me?" Celia's face went white. "What are you doing here? You're supposed to be hiding, running, leaving you to face the consequences alone?" His laugh was cruel, theatrical. I decided to come back and set the record straight. He turned to address the crowd that had gathered around them. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to know the truth about Celia Morrison. She's not the victim here. She's the architect of a scheme that stole money from hardworking people who trusted her with their life savings." "That's not true," Celia protested. "You planned everything. You convinced me." "I convinced you?" Bryce's voice dripped with mock incredulity. "Celia, sweetheart, you were stealing from clients before I ever met you. I just helped you do it more efficiently." The crowd murmured with shock and fascination. This was better than any television drama, real people destroying each other in public, with genuine stakes and authentic consequences. "You're lying," Celia said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Am I? Should we discuss the Riverside development deal? The one where you inflated the property values by 40% and pocketed the difference? That was 6 months before our first business meeting." Celia looked around desperately, seeking support from the faces surrounding her. But the sympathy she'd been cultivating had evaporated, replaced by the cold judgment of a community that had trusted her with their money and their secrets. That's when I decided to make my entrance. "Actually," I said, stepping forward from the crowd, "you're both lying." Every head turned toward me. Celia's expression shifted from desperation to confusion to dawning horror as she realized what was about to happen. "Seth," she whispered, "what are you doing?" I pulled out my phone and activated the portable speaker I'd brought for exactly this moment. "I thought everyone should hear the truth," I said, in Celia's own words. The recording began to play, excerpts from her journal entries, read in her own voice from a dictation app she'd used to transcribe her thoughts. "Seth is sweet, but limited. He's a placeholder husband, someone to provide stability while I figure out what I really want from life." The crowd stirred uneasily. This was more intimate than they'd expected, more personal and painful. Bryce understands my ambitions. He can provide the lifestyle I deserve, the social connections I need to build a real future. Celia lunged toward me, trying to grab the phone, but I stepped back and let the recording continue. The investors are so naive. They actually believe we're looking out for their best interests. If they're stupid enough to trust us with their money, they deserve whatever happens to them. Now the crowd was angry. These were the people Celia had stolen from, the neighbors and friends she'd betrayed for personal gain. Seth will never understand what I'm trying to accomplish. He's content with his little garage and his small-town dreams. I need more than that. I stopped the recording and looked at my wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, with something approaching pity. "You're right," I said. "I never understood what you were trying to accomplish, but I understand now." The crowd began to close in around Celia and Bryce, their voices rising with anger and accusation. But I was already walking away, pushing through the mass of people toward the exit. Behind me, I could hear Celia calling my name, her voice breaking with desperation and rage. But I didn't turn around. I'd said everything I needed to say. Outside, the October air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of salt water and fading leaves. I climbed into my truck and drove home to the house that would soon be mine alone, leaving my wife to face the consequences of her choices. The next morning, Celia was gone. Her clothes, her jewelry, her personal belongings, everything packed hastily and removed while I slept. She left behind a note apologizing for the pain she'd caused and promising to make things right somehow. But she also left behind something else, a legal document transferring her share of our house to me, along with power of attorney to handle the sale of her remaining assets. Riley Matthews called that afternoon to explain. "She's fleeing the country," Riley said. "Bryce, too. They think they can disappear before the federal marshals catch up with them." Will they succeed? For a while, maybe, but they'll be looking over their shoulders for the rest of their lives. I hung up the phone and walked through my empty house, seeing it clearly for the first time in years. It needed work, new paint, updated fixtures, repairs I'd been putting off while my marriage slowly disintegrated. But it was mine now, free and clear, along with the garage, my tools, my reputation, and whatever remained of my life in Eastport. That evening, I reopened Morrison's auto repair and got back to work.